Leaders of the Senate Banking Committee announcing bipartisan plans to dismantle Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac nearly 6 years after taxpayers footed their multi-billion-dollar bailout. So will government finally get out and stay out of housing? Joining me now for a First on Fox interview is the committee's ranking member who's helping draft the legislation, Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho. Senator, welcome to the show. Tell us about your legislation. What does it hope to do?
Well, frankly, Gerri, today the taxpayer is in a first loss position on virtually 90 to 100% of our mortgage debt in the United States. And private sector involvement, capital formation is stifled by the system that we have in place. What our legislation does is wind down Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, create a strong system of underwriting so we don't have the kind of risk of toxic mortgages that created the last crisis, and then put together a government-backed reinsurance program that will put private capital back into the marketplace and put private capital in a first loss position as we move forward in our system, protecting the taxpayer.
Senator, I was reading about your bill, and from what I understand, there would be a backstop, as you say, of money from the companies themselves, the companies that actually make the loans, of 10 cents for every dollar of mortgage debt. So if you're repackaging mortgages out there, this could be a lot of money. What's to say that banks stay in the business of mortgage lending if they're facing what is essentially a huge tax on the business?
Well, it's not necessarily a huge tax. It just means that they have to have skin in the game. It means that the taxpayer cannot be looked to be the first loss position if we get into a crisis. But remember, as I said, we're putting together an underwriting system that will assure that we avoid the toxic mortgages that cause this crisis. We are putting together a requirement that there be an ability to repay by borrowers, that there be adequate down payments, that there be adequate mortgage insurance in the front position that would even protect this first loss position. But we frankly are requiring that those who want to get into the business of marketing mortgages in the United States must be a part of the risk, that there must be some risk on the part of the private sector,
one of the big
rather than putting it all on the government.
One of the big concerns from consumer advocates, frankly, is that we might lose the 30-year fixed mortgage. We're one of the few Western societies who frankly have one anymore. Dick Beauvais, a well-known financial analyst on Wall Street today, said, if you get rid of Fannie and Freddie, if you downsize them, if you do away with them, you essentially get rid of 30-year fixed mortgages. Does he have that right?
No, he has that wrong. The fact is that our plan and our proposal will protect the 30-year mortgage. That is the government-backed reinsurance system that we are establishing. We are requiring that the private sector have a first loss position of 10%, as you indicated, but there is a government-backed reinsurance program similar to the FDIC for deposit insurance protection, and that will preserve the 30-year mortgage in the United States markets.
What are going to be the new requirements for home buyers? And what do you say to critics who are already saying there's not enough protection of programs that would help lower income folks get houses?
We do have programs in place in our legislation that would help to protect for low income and underserved markets. And as a result of that, I think that those critics are just not correct. There are some who would like to go back to the days of the past when we had the kinds of housing goals and mandates put on the private sector that literally drove Fannie and Freddie to help push this market into the toxic assets that generated the crisis. And it's correct that we are avoiding that. We're going back to a system of strong underwriting, solid mortgages, and protection put into place, but we are providing a support base for underserved markets and for low income.
You know, people who watch this network were unhappy to see Fannie and Freddie bailed out to the tune of $202 billion. They've paid that, or I'm sorry, $187 billion. They've paid that back and then some, because all of their profits are essentially going to the federal government.
That's correct.
Now professional investors are starting to beef about that and saying that's not right. It shouldn't happen that way. What do you think should happen, Senator?
Well, first of all, that issue, which is one of what should happen with the profitability of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac today, is one that will be decided in court, not by our legislation. The question that's being raised, I think it's a legitimate question. Right now, all of the profits of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are going to the U.S. Treasury. Remember, though, there was a time when the taxpayer put $180 billion out, and the question is simply whether the taxpayer should get repaid for that on a dollar-for-dollar basis, or whether the taxpayer is entitled to have some of that profit as at least interest as we get into a profitability posture. Like I say, that issue will be resolved by the courts. It's not an issue that our legislation resolves.
Well, profitability posture is always a good place to be, I guess. Do you think this bill is going to pass, and do you think you can get real momentum behind it? Because I think there's a lot invested in having Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac stay. Now, I know there's a lot of critics out there who say these two entities must go, have to go, to have a safe and secure housing market. But do you think you can fight back against that?
Yes, I think we can. I think that the majority of the momentum is against sticking with the current system because, as I said, it puts the taxpayer in a first loss position, and frankly, it stifles private sector capital formation. I think we've got a strong bipartisan coalition. I believe there will be very strong support from the private sector and from those who are taxpayer advocates, and I believe that we have a good chance of passing this legislation.
Senator Crapo, thanks for coming on this show tonight. Great to see you, and I hope you come back as you work on this legislation. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Thanks so much.
Thank you.